We start with growing international calls for Israel to scale back its assault on Gaza. That includes its closest ally, the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has just arrived in Tel Aviv from Bahrain for talks with Israel's defense minister and the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Austin's trip is part of a diplomatic tour of the Middle East. He's expected to press Israel to focus its attacks on Hamas and do more to avoid civilian casualties. Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by the U.S., the EU, and several other countries.
Collecting and burying the dead, now a daily ritual in the Gaza Strip for those able to retrieve the bodies of their loved ones. Many remain trapped under the rubble of bombed-out buildings. These latest victims were killed in Rafah in the south, a supposed safe zone for those fleeing the fighting in other areas of Gaza.
They hit every place. They targeted everywhere. They target at night. Children are always scared and they wake up screaming because of the sound of bombing. There are big targets everywhere in Rafah, but unfortunately there is no safety.
Another recent assault in Rafah killed a French foreign ministry worker who had been sheltering inside a residential home. News of the death came just as France's foreign minister arrived in Israel. Paris has condemned the bombing and is demanding an investigation.
I've also come here to reiterate the importance of a new humanitarian truce. We need to return to a durable truce. A truce that will enable us to work towards a humanitarian ceasefire now.
But Israel says a ceasefire would be nothing more than a gift for Hamas, giving it time to regroup and strike again.
We will eliminate Hamas, release all our hostages, and we promise Gaza won't become a centre of terror once again.
That includes disabling Hamas's vast network of underground tunnels, like this one. According to the Israeli military, it goes down some 50 meters underground and is wide enough for vehicles. Germany's foreign minister and the UK's foreign secretary have also expressed support for a ceasefire, but only if it can be sustained. In a joint opinion article, they write, "We do not believe that calling right now for a general and immediate ceasefire, hoping it somehow becomes permanent, is the way forward." For now, the pair are pushing for further humanitarian pauses to get more aid into Gaza and hostages out. The rising death toll and the accidental killing of 3 hostages by the Israeli military has raised concern over Israel's strategy in Gaza. The U.S. is pushing for a transition to smaller, more tactical missions into the territory. In Tel Aviv, thousands of protesters have been taking part in weekly rallies calling on the government to end the fighting and pursue a peaceful solution that would allow the remaining hostages to return home.
And DW correspondent Tania Krämer has more from Jerusalem. Tania, international pressure on Israel is growing. Are you seeing any signs that Israel might be looking at changing its strategy or entertaining the prospect of a ceasefire even?
Well, as you said, international pressure is growing, but we don't see much impact of that here in policies or strategies. Actually, we heard again over the weekend Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu again reiterating that only maximum military pressure will yield any results, mainly a victory for Israel, or what they say a clear, eliminating Hamas, topple Hamas, and also to release more hostages. So there's no change, at least in the public rhetorics here of the government. Of course, we will be seeing today also the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin also in Israel, and it's expected that he will also reiterate the need for more humanitarian aid coming into Gaza for civilians there, and also less harm to civilians in Gaza, with the U.S. being the closest and strongest ally of Israel during its war efforts, but they also have been calling for less casualties in Gaza. But we haven't seen anything in this regard happening on the ground. But what is also happening here in Israel is there's more and more pressure on the Israeli government domestically to do more to make a new deal to release more hostages after 3 Israeli hostages were killed on Friday by the Israeli military in Gaza.
Several of Israel's closest allies are pushing to revive the idea of a two-state solution, which is widely regarded as the only way out of this crisis. Is there any appetite for that in Israel?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of debates about, what will Gaza look like about after post-war Gaza, what is going to be Israel's role in this. But there are a lot of ideas being floating around, but nothing really concrete. And I think the idea of a two-state solution, or rather the concept of a two-state solution, has been promoted for over 2 decades by the international community, by Western allies, but it has not been implemented. And we've heard also Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that actually he was the one preventing a Palestinian state, which is at the core of this two-state solution, saying 2 states living, 2 people and 2 states living side by side. So I don't expect this, with this right-wing government, also his core allies, the far-right parties, are also against the Palestinian state. So I think this is rather a discussion that is very far away from the reality right now.
Yeah. So a lot of pressure on Netanyahu from abroad, but also at home. Where does that leave him? How stable is he right now in power?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now, there's a lot of pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu from the families and relatives, but also from the public, about bringing more of the Israeli hostages that are being held now that are still being held in Gaza. That there are about 130 hostages that are still in Gaza, and this is the main issue that the country is now focused on. There's also, of course, after this incident with the 3 hostages that were killed by the Israeli army, there's a lot of discussion about the military's rules of engagement in Gaza, about responsibilities, especially when it comes to the Prime Minister. But this is something that will be dealt with after the war. Right now, there's a sense here that time is running out for those hostages, and the pressure is on to bring those hostages back home.
It's Tania Krämer reporting from Jerusalem. Always great to get your take. Thank you so much. Well, she mentioned it there. Israel faces pressure from abroad to scale back its campaign in Gaza. At home, the relatives of hostages still being held by Hamas are pushing for more to be done to rescue their loved ones. Those who have been released so far have been women and children, but as Tania reports now, for the families whose sons were taken on October 7th, hope is scarce.
Rachel Goldberg keeps score of the days her son Hirsch has been held hostage in Gaza. More days have passed since we met, but the family still hasn't heard anything.
A lot of people feel comfort wearing T-shirts with their loved one or a pin with their loved one. That, for me, makes me really uncomfortable. I also don't like that the picture doesn't change. I think there's something important that every day the number changes, and it's showing, it's uncomfortable.
Hirsch was caught up in the attack on the Nova Music Festival on October 7. Militants led by Hamas, considered a terrorist group by multiple countries, killed at least 360 people and took others to Gaza. Hirsch's best friend Arne, on the left here, was one of those killed. Hirsch, on the right, was badly injured and taken.
I pray all the time that I know there are kind, good Gazan civilians who are also caught in this horrible situation that we're caught in, and I want to pray and hope that there's someone kind there being kind to Hirsch and to the other, innocent people who are also being held there in a terrible situation.
Hirsch's family takes some comfort from the support of his friends. They used to hang out here in this bar in Jerusalem. All are avid supporters of football club Hapoel Jerusalem. They've made sure he cannot be forgotten.
We are doing bad. It's really, nothing is the same, and even we try and we succeed in a lot of moments of our day to keep living. You know, we meet here, we drink our beers, we watch our football team, and we try to do what we were doing before, but that's not the situation, and every time you have a moment to realize, you remember that Hirsch is a hostage in Gaza.
They also mourn their friend Arne, killed that day. It was a day that changed their world.
It's the biggest incidents we've had for our generation, for sure. But I think it's kind of a part of being here. Is there's always something happening, and there's always. But I think this is the first time it really hit me personally with Hirsch, and maybe also our community.
Hirsch's fate is also present at this German football club. He was a frequent visitor here in Bremen, thanks to strong links between supporters of his football club and those of Werder Bremen.
I know him as a very charismatic person. He's very outgoing, very open, unbelievably tolerant. He tries to bring people together.
We're so far away. What can we do from here to somehow keep this topic and our friend close to us? That's what we try to do with our conversations and messages with Rachel. To find a way to offer support from so far away to where we feel so connected in our hearts.
Fans there flying the flag for Hirsch gives comfort to his mother in Jerusalem.
I call them my friends. They're Hirsch's friends, but who write and keep me posted and send pictures of different rallies and different soccer games and different, exhibitions that are put out, not to forget these human beings who are being held against their will in very scary conditions and situations. And it actually really helps me, I think. It helps me to breathe in this world without air.
For now, she counts the days, and she waits.